So, there I was, living my best life as a mildly functional adult. Emphasis on mildly. You know the type, the kind of person who considers it a win if she remembers to put on matching socks and doesn't accidentally set off the fire alarm while microwaving leftovers. That's me, Ellie, the girl who once Googled how to boil an egg and still managed to mess it up. Honestly, I'm not sure how I've made it this far in life without accidentally setting myself on fire or getting locked in a grocery store freezer, though, to be fair, that last one was a close call. My mornings usually start with a battle against my alarm clock, which I've named the Screaming Demon because it's loud enough to wake the dead, but somehow not loud enough to wake me. After hitting snooze approximately 47 times, I drag myself out of bed, tripping over the pile of laundry I've been meaning to fold since, last Tuesday. I'd like to say I'm one of those people who wakes up at 5 a.m, does yoga and drinks green smoothies, but let's be real, I'm more of a wake up at the last possible minute, chug cold coffee, and hope for the best kind of gal. Work is, well, work. I'm a mid-level marketing associate at a company that's about as exciting as plain toast. My boss, Ethan, is the human equivalent of beige wallpaper. Bland, forgettable, and somehow always in the way. He's the kind of guy who says things like synergy and circle back with a straight face and genuinely believes he's a visionary. Spoiler, he's not. The only thing he's visionary about is finding new ways to micromanage everyone into an early grave. My co-workers are a mixed bag. There's Mia, my best friend, and the only reason I haven't quit this job out of sheer boredom. She's the sarcastic, no-nonsense type who keeps me sane with her daily texts like, if Ethan says low-hanging fruit one more time, I'm throwing myself out the window. Then there's Chad, the office himbo who's weirdly good at Excel but once asked me if Wi-Fi was short for wireless fishing. Bless his heart, my days are a blur of spreadsheets, meetings that could have been emails, and trying not to cry in the break room. The highlight of my week is usually Friday, when I treat myself to a fancy latte from the coffee shop downstairs. By fancy, I mean it has whipped cream. I'm not made of money, okay? But even that small joy is often overshadowed by the crushing weight of adulting. Like the time I accidentally emailed my boss a grocery list titled "Why Am I Like This?" instead of the quarterly report he'd asked for. His response? Interesting priorities, Ellie. Cool, thanks, Ethan. Really appreciate the feedback. Outside of work, my life is a series of small victories and embarrassing fails. I finally managed to parallel park without crying last week, which felt like a major accomplishment until I realised I'd left my headlights on and drained my battery. Cue me frantically Googling how to jumpstart a car while a line of angry drivers honked behind me. I also recently discovered that my healthy meal prep routine consists mainly of pasta and regret. But hey, at least I'm trying, right? The point is, I'm not exactly living the glamorous life. I'm just a regular person trying to figure out how to adult without completely falling apart. And most days, I'm okay with that. Sure, I'm not where I thought I'd be at this point in my life, but I'm surviving. And sometimes that's enough. Little did I know, though, that my mildly chaotic but mostly manageable life was about to take a hard left into what the actual hell territory. But more on that later. For now, let's just say I was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. Ignorance is bliss, right? Yeah, well, bliss is overrated. Life, as I knew it, was chugging along in its usual chaotic but predictable way. Sure, I had my moments of existential dread, like when I realised I'd been using the same toothbrush for way too long, or when I found a forgotten avocado in the back of my fridge that had somehow evolved into a new life form. But overall, things were fine. Not great, not terrible, just fine. And honestly, I was okay with that. Fine was underrated. Work was its usual mix of monotony and mild panic. Ethan, my beige wallpaper boss, had recently assigned me a new project, organising financial reports for the annual audit. Now, let me be clear. I'm not a numbers person. I'm the kind of person who still uses her fingers to count, and once had a minor meltdown because her bank account balance didn't match her mental math. Turns out, I'd forgotten to carry the 1, or the 2, or whatever. But Ethan, in his infinite wisdom, decided I was the perfect person for the job. His exact words, "Ellie, I need someone detail-oriented and meticulous." I'm pretty sure he was confusing me with someone else, but hey, who was I to argue? So there I was, knee-deep in spreadsheets and trying not to cry, when I overheard Ethan arguing with someone on the phone. His voice was low and tense, which was unusual because Ethan's default setting is mildly condescending. I caught snippets of the conversation, something about moving the funds and covering our tracks, but I didn't think much of it. Ethan was always talking in corporate jargon that made no sense to anyone but him. I figured it was just another day in the life of a middle manager trying to sound important. Meanwhile, my personal life was, well, let's just say it wasn't exactly thriving. I went on a date with a guy named Brian who spent the entire evening talking about his pet iguana, Steve. Apparently, Steve had a complex personality and trust issues. I'm not kidding. By the end of the night, I knew more about Steve's dietary preferences than I did about Brian. I texted Mia afterward, "I'd rather be single forever than listen to another reptile monologue." She replied with a crying laughing emoji and a link to a dating app for normal people. Bless her. Despite the iguana-induced trauma, I was feeling oddly optimistic. I'd finally gotten a raise at work thanks to Mia's pep talk and my ability to fake confidence like a pro, and I was determined to celebrate. I bought a fancy bottle of wine, ordered takeout from my favourite Thai place, and settled in for a night of binge-watching reality TV. It was going to be perfect. And then, of course, disaster struck. I spilled an entire glass of red wine on my laptop. Because of course I did. 1 minute, I was happily watching people argue over who stole whose boyfriend, and the next, my screen was flickering like a strobe light at a rave. I panicked, Googling how to fix a wine-soaked laptop while frantically blotting it with paper towels. Spoiler, it didn't work. My laptop was toast, and so was my celebratory mood. The next morning, I dragged myself to work feeling like a zombie who'd been hit by a bus. Ethan gave me his usual disapproving look when I walked in late, clutching a giant coffee and a bagel that was mostly crumbs. "Rough night, Ellie?" he asked, his tone dripping with faux concern. I wanted to tell him to shove his passive-aggressive comments where the sun doesn't shine, but instead I just smiled and nodded. Because that's what adults do, right? We smile and nod and die a little inside. Little did I know, this was the calm before the storm, the quiet before the chaos, the moment before everything went sideways. But at the time, I was blissfully unaware. I was just a girl trying to survive another day in the trenches of adulthood, one spilled latte and awkward date at a time. If only I'd known what was coming, maybe I would have savoured the calm a little more. Hindsight's a real jerk like that. It started like any other Tuesday. I woke up late, shocker, tripped over my laundry, again, and spilled coffee on my shirt while rushing out the door. Classic Ellie. By the time I got to work, I was already sweating and mentally preparing myself for Ethan's inevitable lecture about punctuality. But as I walked into the office, something felt off. The usual hum of keyboards and hushed conversations was replaced by an eerie silence. People were staring at me like I'd just walked in wearing a clown suit. Before I could ask Mia what was going on, 2 police officers stepped out of Ethan's office and headed straight for me. My brain short-circuited. Can this wait? I'm in the middle of a very important existential crisis, I wanted to say, but the words got stuck in my throat. Instead, I just stood there, clutching my coffee like it was a lifeline, as they informed me I was under arrest for embezzling $2 million from the company. Wait, what? Me? The girl who still uses her calculator app to figure out if she can afford a third latte this week. The one who once accidentally donated $50 to a charity because she misread the donate button as decline. That's who they thought was capable of pulling off a multi-million-dollar heist. The irony was almost laughable. Almost. The evidence, they said, was overwhelming. Fake emails from my account, doctored spreadsheets, and a paper trail so convincing even I started questioning if I'd developed a secret second personality who was a financial genius. Spoiler, I hadn't. My only secret personality is the one that eats an entire family-sized bag of chips at 2 a.m. while watching infomercials about knives that can cut through a shoe. Why a shoe? Who knows, but I'm weirdly invested. Before I could process what was happening, they cuffed me and read me my rights. I remember thinking, this can't be real. This has to be a prank. Maybe Chad set this up to teach me a lesson about being late. But as they led me out of the office, past my wide-eyed co-workers and Ethan's smug face, it hit me. This was very, very real. The ride to the station was a blur. I sat in the back of the squad car staring out the window and wondering how my life had gone from mildly chaotic to full-on disaster movie. My mind raced with questions. Who would do this to me? Why? And how the hell was I going to get out of it? At the station, they took my mugshot. I was still wearing my coffee-stained shirt and dinosaur pajama pants because of course I was. The photo captured me mid-blinking, with my hair sticking up in every direction and a look of sheer panic on my face. It was, without a doubt, the most unflattering picture ever taken of me, and that's saying something, considering the time I tried to cut my own bangs. They put me in a holding cell, and I spent the next several hours alternating between crying, pacing, and Googling how to survive prison on my one phone call. Spoiler, the internet is not helpful in these situations. I kept replaying the day in my head, trying to figure out where things had gone so wrong. But no matter how many times I went over it, I couldn't make sense of it. The only thing I knew for sure was this: I didn't do it. I may be a lot of things, messy, scatterbrained, occasionally clueless, but I'm not a criminal, and I wasn't about to let someone ruin my life without a fight. As I sat there, staring at the graffiti-covered walls of my cell, I made myself a promise. I was going to clear my name no matter what it took, even if it meant taking down Ethan, the company, or the entire justice system. Okay, maybe not the entire justice system. I am not that ambitious, but you get the idea. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The days after my arrest were a blur of humiliation, confusion, and a lot of Pop-Tarts. Stress eating is a real thing, okay? I was released on bail thanks to my Aunt Karen, who showed up with a checkbook and a lecture about making better life choices. Thanks, Aunt Karen. Really appreciate the vote of confidence. Coming home was surreal. My neighbours, who usually waved hello, or at least pretended not to see me, now avoided eye contact like I was a walking biohazard. I caught Mrs. Henderson from across the hall peeking through her blinds as I walked to my apartment. I waved. She quickly closed the blinds. Cool. Inside, my apartment felt like a crime scene. The cops had turned the place upside down during their search, and I didn't have the energy to clean it up. My couch was buried under a mountain of laundry, my kitchen table was covered in unopened mail, and my fridge contained exactly 3 things: a half-empty jar of pickles, a questionable block of cheese, and a single can of soda. It was like a sad metaphor for my life. Work, of course, was a no-go. I'd been fired faster than you can say wrongfully accused. My inbox was flooded with emails from HR, legal, and a few nosy co-workers who wanted the inside scoop. I didn't have the heart to respond. What was I supposed to say? Hey, sorry, I missed the meeting. I was busy being framed for embezzlement. Let's circle back next week. The court dates were a nightmare. My public defender, a guy named Mark, who looked like he hadn't slept since 2012, kept telling me to stay positive, while simultaneously preparing me for the worst. "The evidence is pretty damning," he said, flipping through a stack of papers that might as well have been my obituary. "But we'll figure something out." "Gee, thanks, Mark. Really inspiring stuff." My family tried to be supportive, but it was awkward. My mum kept sending me articles like "Starting Over After a Scandal" and "How to Rebuild Your Life When Everything Falls Apart." My dad, who's not big on emotions, just patted me on the shoulder and said, "This, too, shall pass." Meanwhile, my little brother thought the whole thing was hilarious and kept asking if I'd gotten any prison tattoos yet. Spoiler, no. The worst part, though, was the isolation. Mia was the only one who stuck by me, showing up at my apartment with wine, snacks, and a willingness to listen to me rant for hours. "We'll figure this out," she said, her voice steady and reassuring. "You didn't do this, Ellie, and we're going to prove it." I wanted to believe her, but it was hard to stay optimistic when the entire world seemed to be against me. Social media didn't help. My mugshot had gone viral, and the comments were brutal. "She looks like she'd steal your wallet and your boyfriend," one person wrote. "Who wears dinosaur pajamas to work?" asked another. Answer, me, apparently. I tried to avoid the internet, but it was like a train wreck. I couldn't look away. Every time I opened my phone, there was another article or meme or hot take about my alleged crimes. It was exhausting. The only silver lining, if you could call it that, was the sudden clarity I had about who my real friends were. Spoiler, there weren't many. Most of my co-workers ghosted me, and even Chad, the office himbo, stopped responding to my texts. Though, to be fair, he might have just forgotten how to use his phone. But Mia was there, every step of the way, reminding me that I wasn't alone. As the weeks dragged on, I started to feel like I was living in a bad dream. Every day was the same. Wake up, stress eat, scroll through the internet, cry, repeat. I was stuck in this endless loop of anger, fear, and self-pity, and I didn't know how to break free. But then, one night, as I sat on my couch surrounded by empty Pop-Tart wrappers and watched an infomercial for a knife that could cut through a shoe. Why a shoe? Who knows? Something inside me snapped. I was tired of feeling sorry for myself, tired of being the victim, tired of letting someone else control my life. I didn't know how, but I was going to fight back, and I was going to win. It was 2 a.m., and I was sitting on my couch surrounded by a fortress of empty snack bags and half-finished cups of coffee that had long since gone cold. The TV was on, but I wasn't really watching. Some infomercial guy was enthusiastically demonstrating a knife that could cut through a shoe. Seriously, why a shoe? And I was only half listening, my brain too fried to process anything beyond the fact that I was officially at rock bottom. I'd spent the last 6 weeks wallowing in self-pity, stress eating my way through every flavour of Pop-Tart known to man, and Googling things like how to disappear and start a new life in Costa Rica. But as I sat there, staring at the knife guy like he held the secrets of the universe, something inside me snapped. I was tired of feeling sorry for myself, tired of being the victim, tired of letting Ethan or whoever had framed me control my life. I grabbed my laptop, the one I'd borrowed from Mia after mine died a tragic, wine-soaked death, and opened a new tab. "How to prove your innocence," I typed, my fingers trembling slightly. The search results were less than helpful. Mostly legal advice I couldn't afford, and inspirational quotes that made me want to throw my laptop out the window. But then I stumbled across an article about people who'd solved their own crimes. Real-life amateur detectives who'd taken matters into their own hands and cleared their names. If they can do it, why can't I thought, a spark of determination igniting in my chest. Sure, I wasn't exactly Sherlock Holmes, but I had one thing those people didn't. Mia. And if there was one person who could help me take down Ethan and clear my name, it was her. I texted her immediately. "I need your help. Operation Clear Ellie's Name starts now." Her response came almost instantly. "Finally, I was starting to think you'd given up. Be there in 10. True to her word, Mia showed up at my apartment with a bag of snacks, a notebook, and a determined look on her face. "All right, let's do this," she said, plopping down on the couch next to me. "Where do we start?" We started with what we knew. Ethan was shady, the evidence against me was fake, and someone had gone to a lot of trouble to make me look guilty. "This wasn't just about framing you," Mia said, tapping her pen against the notebook. "This was personal. Someone wanted to ruin you." I nodded, my mind racing. "But who? And why?" Mia leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Let's start with Ethan. He's the one who assigned you the financial reports, right? Maybe he was trying to cover his own tracks." It made sense. Ethan had been acting weird lately, more secretive than usual, always on the phone, and constantly looking over his shoulder like he was expecting someone to jump out and yell, "Gotcha!" Plus, there was that conversation I'd overheard about moving the funds. At the time, I'd brushed it off as corporate nonsense, but now it felt like a clue. We spent the next few hours brainstorming, scribbling notes, and piecing together a plan. It wasn't much, just a list of people to talk to, documents to look for, and a vague idea of how to hack into Ethan's emails. Mia knew a guy, but it was a start. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a purpose, like I was doing something instead of just sitting around waiting for my life to fall apart. As the sun started to rise, Mia stretched and yawned. "We should probably get some sleep," she said, glancing at the clock. "But tomorrow we hit the ground running. No more sitting around feeling sorry for yourself. It's time to fight back." I nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. Operation Clear Ellie's Name is officially underway. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I didn't know how, but I was going to clear my name. And when I did, Ethan, or whoever had framed me, was going to regret ever messing with me. If my life were a movie, this would be the part where an upbeat pop song plays as I transform from a stressed-out, pyjama-clad mess into a determined, slightly unhinged amateur detective. Cue the montage. First up, stakeouts. Mia and I spent hours parked outside Ethan's house in her beat-up Honda, eating donuts and pretending we were in some kind of gritty crime drama. We took turns watching his front door through binoculars, whispering things like, "Do you think he knows we're here?" and "What if he's onto us?" Spoiler, he wasn't. Ethan was too busy living his best life, blissfully unaware that the girl he'd framed was currently spying on him from a car that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Next, we moved on to hacking. Well, Mia moved on to hacking. I mostly just sat there, eating chips and offering moral support while she called her sketchy friend from the coffee shop. "Yeah, we need access to Ethan's emails," she said, her voice low and serious. "No, I don't care how you do it. Just make it happen." I have no idea who this guy was or how Mia knew him, but at this point, I wasn't asking questions. Desperate times, desperate measures. Once we had access to Ethan's emails, things got interesting. We found a treasure trove of incriminating evidence, offshore account numbers, shady transactions, and a folder labelled Project Embezzle that contained enough dirt to bury him. It was like Christmas morning, if Christmas morning involved a lot of illegal activity and the constant fear of getting caught. The final piece of the puzzle came when we planted a fake story about a mystery whistleblower to freak Ethan out. We leaked it to a few gossipy co-workers and watched as the rumour spread like wildfire. Within hours, Ethan was pacing around the office, looking like a man who'd just realised his house of cards was about to collapse. It was glorious. The breakthrough came on a Thursday, because of course it did. Thursdays are the most chaotic day of the week, sandwiched awkwardly between the optimism of Wednesday and the relief of Friday. Mia and I were knee-deep in Ethan's emails, Our eyes glazed over from staring at screens for hours when we found it. The smoking gun. It was a photo. Not just any photo, though. It was Ethan, dressed as a pirate at last year's Halloween party, holding a folder labelled Project Embezzle. At the time, I'd thought it was just a joke, Ethan's idea of office humour. But now, with everything we'd uncovered, it felt like a neon sign pointing directly to his guilt. "This is it," Mia said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "This is the proof we need." I stared at the photo, my heart racing. Ethan looked ridiculous in his pirate costume, complete with an eye patch and a plastic sword. But there was nothing funny about the folder in his hand. It was filled with documents detailing the embezzlement scheme, including fake invoices, forged signatures, and a list of offshore accounts. It was like he'd handed us the keys to his downfall without even realizing it. But the photo wasn't the only thing we found. Buried in his emails were incriminating texts between Ethan and his accomplice, a shady accountant named Derek. They were discussing how to tie up loose ends and make sure Ellie takes the fall. Reading those messages made my blood boil. They'd planned this. They'd deliberately chosen me as their scapegoat because they thought I was too nice, too quiet, too weak to fight back. Joke's on them. "We've got him," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "This is everything we need to clear my name and take him down." Mia grinned, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Operation Clear Ellie's Name just got a whole lot more interesting. And with that, we started planning our next move. The end game was in sight, and I wasn't about to let Ethan or anyone else get away with ruining my life. The company's annual gala was the kind of event I usually avoided like the plague. Fancy dresses, small talk with people I barely knew, and the constant fear of spilling something on myself. But this year, I had a reason to go. A big reason. This was it. The moment we'd been working toward. The perfect opportunity to expose Ethan and clear my name. Mia and I spent days planning every detail. We hacked into the gala's AV system, thanks again to Mia's sketchy coffee shop friend, and uploaded all the evidence we'd gathered. The pirate photo, the incriminating emails, the offshore account numbers, everything. We even added a few dramatic touches, like a slow zoom on Ethan's face during his speech, and a dramatic voiceover that said, "The truth will come to light." Okay, fine. That last part was my idea. I've watched too many crime dramas. The night of the gala, I showed up in a borrowed dress and a pair of heels that were definitely going to destroy my feet by the end of the night. Mia was my +1, and we spent the first hour blending in, sipping champagne and pretending to be normal guests. It was harder than it looked. Every time I saw Ethan, I had to fight the urge to march up to him and yell, "I know what you did." But I kept my cool. This wasn't the time for impulsive decisions. This was the time for revenge. As the evening wore on, the tension grew. Ethan took the stage, looking smug and self-important in his tuxedo. He started his speech droning on about integrity and transparency, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. The irony was almost too much to handle. Mia gave me a subtle nod, and I knew it was time. We slipped into the AV booth, our hearts racing as we prepared to unleash the truth. The moment had finally arrived. The room was a sea of glittering dresses and polished suits, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the faint hum of polite conversation. Ethan stood at the podium, his voice booming through the speakers as he delivered his speech about integrity and corporate responsibility. I swear, if I had $1 for every time he said the word transparency, I could have paid off my legal fees and bought a small island. Mia and I hovered near the back of the room, trying to look inconspicuous. I was sweating through my borrowed dress, my heels pinching my feet with every step, but I didn't care. This was it, the moment we'd been waiting for. As Ethan droned on, Mia gave me a subtle nod. It was time. We slipped into the AV booth where Mia's sketchy friend had already set everything up. My hands were shaking as I hovered over the keyboard, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone in the room could hear it. "Ready?" Mia whispered, her eyes gleaming with excitement. I took a deep breath and nodded. "Let's do this." With a few keystrokes, the screens behind Ethan lit up, not with the boring PowerPoint slides he'd prepared, but with the evidence we'd spent weeks gathering. The room fell silent as the first image appeared. Ethan, in his pirate costume, holding the Project Embezzle folder. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the screen shifted to show his offshore account numbers, incriminating emails, and a particularly damning text exchange with Derek. Ethan froze, his mouth hanging open mid-sentence. He looked like a deer in headlights, his face pale and his hands gripping the podium like it was the only thing keeping him upright. The room erupted into chaos, people shouting, phones buzzing, and the sound of chairs scraping against the floor as everyone tried to get a better look. I stepped out of the booth, my heart racing but my head held high. "That's right," I wanted to say. "I did this, and I'm not sorry." Ethan tried to flee, but the cops were already waiting for him. As they led him away in handcuffs, I couldn't help but smile. Justice, it seemed, was finally served. The days after the gala were a whirlwind of chaos, vindication, and way too much caffeine. Ethan's arrest made headlines, and suddenly everyone wanted to talk to me. Reporters camped outside of my apartment, my phone blew up with interview requests, and my inbox was flooded with emails from people I hadn't heard from in years. It was overwhelming, but also kind of amazing. For the first time in months, I wasn't the villain, I was the hero. The company issued a public apology, offering me my job back and a hefty settlement to make things right. I accepted the settlement, but politely declined the job. As much as I loved the idea of walking back into that office with my head held high, I couldn't imagine working there again. Too many memories, too much drama. Besides, I had bigger plans. Mia and I became minor internet celebrities overnight. Memes of Ethan in his pirate costume went viral, and my dinosaur pajama mugshot was suddenly a symbol of resilience. People started calling me the girl who took down corporate greed, which was flattering, if a little dramatic. I mean, I didn't exactly take down the entire system, just one very bad guy. My family couldn't stop talking about it. My mum framed a newspaper article about the scandal and hung it in the living room, and my little brother started calling me Ellie Holmes. Even Aunt Karen stopped lecturing me about life choices and started bragging to her friends about how her niece was a real-life whistleblower. But the best part, the sense of relief, the weight that had been crushing me for months was finally gone. I could breathe again. I could sleep again. I could eat something other than Pop-Tarts. Though, to be fair, I still ate a lot of Pop-Tarts. Old habits die hard. As the dust settled, I realised something. I wasn't just clearing my name, I was reclaiming my life, and it felt incredible. Life after the scandal was different. Not perfect, but different in the best way possible. I moved out of my tiny apartment and into a slightly less tiny one, complete with a balcony that overlooked the city. It wasn't much, but it felt like a fresh start. I even bought a plant, a fern named Steve, in honour of Brian's iguana. R.I.P. Steve the iguana, you deserved better. I started a consulting business, helping other women navigate workplace injustices and fight back against corporate bullies. It was equal parts rewarding and exhausting, but I loved it. Every time I helped someone stand up for themselves, I felt like I was turning my own nightmare into something positive. Mia joined me as my business partner, and together, we became a dynamic duo of justice and sass. My love life even took a turn for the better. Remember the sketchy guy from the coffee shop who helped us hack Ethan's emails? Turns out, he's not so sketchy after all. His name's Jake, and he's actually kind of amazing. Smart, funny, and most importantly, doesn't own an iguana. Our first date was a disaster. I spilled wine on his shirt and he accidentally set off the fire alarm at the restaurant. But it was also kind of perfect. We've been inseparable ever since. As for Ethan, he's serving time for embezzlement and fraud. Last I heard, he tried to start a prison book club, but no one showed up. Karma's a real jerk like that. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. From being framed for a crime I didn't commit to taking down the guy who tried to ruin my life. It's been a wild ride. But through it all, I've learned one thing. I'm stronger than I ever thought possible. Life's still messy, and I'm still figuring things out. Like how to keep Steve the fern alive and why parallel parking is so hard. But that's okay. I'm not perfect, and I don't need to be. I'm just Ellie, the girl who fought back, cleared her name, and finally learned to trust herself. And honestly, that's more than enough.